It's not an infallible sign, but it's a good sign. Well, the first one was called Populorum Progressio, which was written when what we now call globalization was in its infancy. In this prophetic encyclical, Paul warned that if the world did not develop with justice and equity, the resulting inequality would shake the world apart to produce pretty much the situation that we have today. The other encyclical was Humanae Vitae, which dealt with human sexuality, and particularly with the difficult issue of contraception. In Benedict's view, Humanae Vitae indicates the strong links between life ethics and social ethics. Here, the ethic of life does not stand alone and isolated, one issue in a world of contending issues and ideologies, but as the foundation of a whole social dynamic, a dynamic which is expressed in Populorum Progressio. The issues of life and social ethics are not severable, are not divorced. Rather, the former is the foundation of the latter. And if either attempts to stand alone, both will collapse. Now, before analyzing Benedict's views, we should point out that his position is problematic from the standpoint of modern economics. This is because at the end of the 19th century, the whole question of justice, much less the question of love, was banished from economic thought in the name of making the discipline more scientific. But they conceived science along the lines of physics. However, economics is not a physical science. It is a humane science. The attempt to ape physics meant that economics could no longer properly describe human actions or human interrelationships. These things exceed physics, and hence the economic science could no longer come up with complete economic theories. So it comes as no surprise to learn that 90% of economists miss the coming of the current crisis. And those that did warn of it were marginalized as Dr. Dooms. This is a pattern which repeats itself in crisis after crisis. And the reason they can never catch it is because every such disaster traces itself to a failure of justice. But justice has been banned from the science. We should note that this exclusion of justice from economic science is a recent development. From the time of Aristotle, right down to the time of Adam Smith, justice was considered as foundational to the economic order. Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, uses the term 100 times. However, just about 100 years later, A.E. Marshall, one of the founders of modern economics, uses the term just 4 times in his seminal textbook. And William Jevons, another founder of modern economics, uses the term only once, and that to state that it should not be used at all. The Church's concept of justice in economics is focused mainly on just wage and just price theories. This is baffling to modern economics, where labor is just another commodity, like wheat or pig iron. However, this is simply incorrect. Economics deals with how to achieve a rough balance between supply and demand. In a wage economy, the bulk of demand will be formed by wages. Now, the investor may think himself very clever when he increases his profit by depressing wages. But he catches himself in a trap. By lowering the wage, he has also narrowed the market. And hence, he has narrowed his own investment opportunities. The result is that instead of investing his capital in the real economy, the economy that produces real goods and services, he turns more and more to purely speculative instruments. Instruments like the CDOs, MBSs, CDSs, CDO squared, etc. The whole alphabet soup of exotic speculative instruments of which we have become all too familiar. Now, we know why the banks issued such securities, but it is odd, I think, that very few ever ask why anybody ever bought these things. They were obviously unconnected with the real economy and hence with real values. The answer comes in the failure of the just wage. Since 1973, the median wage of the white male worker has been flat. It hasn't changed in real terms in over 35 years. Yet productivity at that same time has exploded. So how was the worker supposed to purchase the increased output with the same wage? Well, three methods were used. The first was to increase government purchases, often on credit, and this was able to absorb some of the output. Thus, the failure of the wage contributed directly to the growth of government. Secondly, more families put more members, mostly mothers, to work in the wage economy. And women worked at higher and higher job levels. Now, whatever one may think of this from the standpoint of women's rights, it certainly had a profound effect on the family. But in the last 12 years, even the family wage has flattened, so that another method had to be found. And that method was the expansion of consumer credit, or usury. Using borrowed money, the consumers were able to absorb the increased output. However, this is not real wealth, but it's mere appearance. Using borrowed money, the consumers were able, when we may live in bigger homes, drive bigger cars, consume more calories, own more gadgets, but if our ownership turns out to be on credit, then it's all a fraud. For these reasons, G.K. Chesterton noted that capitalism is contradictory as soon as it is complete. For the master is always trying to cut down what his servant demands, and in doing so is cutting down what his customer can spend. He is trying to treat the same person in contradictory ways. He wants to pay him like a pauper, but expects him to spend like a prince. I think it is no great matter to show that justice is intrinsic to economic order. But can we do the same with love, and specifically with the principle of gratuitousness? Can such a principle really be part of economic science? Businesses, after all, are run to make a profit, which seems to be contrary to the idea of the gift. Now, the Pope does understand the need for profit, a word he uses 14 times. But he understands profit as a means to an end, rather than as an end in itself. Making a profit tells a businessman that he has properly allocated the resources of the firm.